In the last episode of Historical Deep Dives, we talked about women whose wartime lives felt unmistakably novel-worthy. Women whose courage had faces, names, stories we can still trace. But today, I want to talk about the women who weren't meant to be remembered at all. Not because their work wasn't important, but because invisibility was the point. This is the story of the women behind the war effort, the ones whose success depended on silence, on anonymity, on never stepping into the light. When we picture wartime intelligence, we often imagine danger in motion, coded messages passed at cafes, midnight escapes, last-minute transmissions. But real wartime intelligence wasn't built on lone heroes. It was built as a system. And much of the most critical work happened in rooms that looked almost ordinary. Long tables, stacks of paper, endless repetition. It was work that required patience more than bravado, focus more than flair. And it was work women were often assigned, precisely because it was seen as quiet, meticulous, and unassuming. And once you understand that structure, you start to see wartime fiction differently. At Britain's code-breaking center, Bletchley Park, thousands of women worked in near total secrecy. They sorted messages, ran machines, checked patterns, translated fragments of information that meant nothing on their own, but when pieced together, meant everything. Many of them never knew what their work contributed to. They were instructed not to ask questions, not to speculate, not to talk. Some didn't even know they had helped shorten the war until decades later, if they learned it at all. What strikes me as a writer is how much trust this required to show up every day, do your work flawlessly, and never be told why it mattered. This silence wasn't accidental. Wartime intelligence depended on compartmentalization, each person knowing only what she absolutely needed to know. The less one woman knew, the safer everyone was if something went wrong. Anonymity protected operations, but it also erased people. When the war ended, many women simply went home. No medals, no public acknowledgement, sometimes not even permission to tell their families what they had done. History moved on without making space for them. Silence, after all, wasn't necessarily a failure of recognition. It was also a safeguard. Codebreakers weren't the only ones. There were couriers who carried messages they were never meant to read, moving information without context, trusting timing more than understanding. There were clerks who tracked fragments of intelligence without knowing their source or destination. They maintained order without ever seeing the full picture. Translators who worked under enormous pressure to render meaning precisely, knowing that a single word misread or misunderstood could change everything. These roles rarely headline novels or films. They don't come with disguises or dramatic escapes, but without them, the larger stories collapse. This was intelligence built on precision, restraint, and trust. They are the scaffolding holding the visible drama in place. This is where historical fiction does something vital. It asks, what did it feel like to do work that could never be claimed? To matter deeply without being remembered. Fiction gives us the emotional interior history often withholds. It lets us imagine the long hours, the fatigue, the quiet pride, the unanswered questions carried for a lifetime. And in doing so, it restores dignity to lives that were intentionally obscured. If this part of history resonates with you, there are some extraordinary novels that bring these invisible women into focus. One that many readers already love is The Rose Code by Kate Quinn, which explores friendship, secrecy, and betrayal among women working at Bletchley Park. Stories like this remind us that behind every coded message was a human life, with fears, loyalties, and choices that mattered. I'll include a short reading list in the description if you'd like to explore further. I often think about how many women lived with the knowledge they were never allowed to share. How many stories were carried silently for decades. And how many were lost entirely because no one thought to ask. These women weren't footnotes, they were foundations. In our final episode of this mini-series, we're going to zoom in even closer, not on people, but on things. The objects of espionage, the radios, the code books, the false names in borrowed rooms. We'll talk about what films exaggerate and what they leave out, and how small, ordinary details can make historical fiction feel true. Because sometimes it's not the grand gesture that makes a story believable. It's the quiet tool held in steady hands. Until next time, happy reading. At Britain's code-breaking centre, Bletchley Park, thousands of women worked in near total secrecy. They sorted messages, ran machines, checked patterns, translated fragments of information that meant nothing on their own, but when pieced together, meant everything. Many of them never knew what their work contributed to. Oh, the motorcycle's making noise again. I have to start over.